Wait, I thought I had 5 seconds.
Yeah.
I don't have 5 seconds anymore. Good evening. Welcome to another episode of Sewing Shenanigans with Becky and Brent without the Becky. So you. How dare you!
I meant welcome.
Welcome. Yes. So as you can guess, because we don't have Becky here, it's going to be a lot less organized. Hopefully, you'll get something out of it. There's not going to be a quiz time, and I just realized there's not going to be a quiz of the week or a turbo tip. It's going to be me talking to you. Yay! But we'll have it's like a fireside chat. Isn't that what FDR used to do? It was like all special? Yes. I don't smoke. Come on now. We know smoking's evil.
Yeah, but that's what a fireside chat is.
Oh. I don't know. Is that what that president there that used to do them? He'd like get out some.
I think it's in my head that way.
Oh, I could totally see that, just smoking a cigar with a glass of whiskey. Do you know what we got going on here? Okay. Anyway, completely sidetracked. Thanks for joining us for another episode of Shenanigans with Brent, I guess. Oh, is that the Turbo Tips? Are we still live? We are? We have no idea what's going on. This is what happens when we don't have Becky. Becky, we miss you already. So anyway, I'll get started with shop news.
I see a turbo tip.
Yeah, because there's no turbo tips. It's Eddie playing with the graph. Anyway, shop news. Classes coming up. Bonnie's fabric selection class on Tuesday was fantastic. We had a fairly full class for the afternoon session. And she's got it coming up again on August 21st. Like I said, this is a class to kind of color selection, color theory to kind of around her block of the month that Bonnie's going to be running starting in September. So if you're interested, go on our website. You can sign up. The color theory class is free. Just sign up. So if you can sign up, it would be good. So we just have an idea who's coming, what kind of numbers we have. That being said, the block of the month. She's got a lot of response on that, so if you're interested in that as well, sign up sooner than later because that's going to be that's filling up. The other big class we've got coming up is Design Center Basics. That's going to be Saturday, August 28th. That will be hosted by me. It'll be very exciting. So the Design Center Basics will be happening on Saturday, August 28th. Then, beginner quilting. You can see all this on the calendar. I don't know why I read this off. If you go to our website, fourpinesquilting.com, you can check out our calendar. I'm just hitting the highlights. The big one, the next big one is probably going to be beginner quilting on September 1st. We're putting the finishing touches on our Intro to Paper Piecing class. We're going to run one on September 11th and one on September 21st. It's going to be really good. The charge on that's going to be $49.95. It will include the book and most of the materials. So it's one of those you just show up and learn. It's going to be more of a techniques class. I don't know that you're going to go home with a project, but you're going to go home with a lot of know-how. It's going to be a real fun class. Edge to edge with machine embroidery. Yeah, that's on the calendar. I'm still working the details out, so I'm not going to get you excited about it because I don't know the details, so I don't know how to get you excited about that. And then the other big thing is Open Sew Fridays. We have our Friday set aside for people to just come on in, hang out, and sew. So that you're all welcome to do that. Again, if you can give us a heads up so we can get an idea of numbers, if it's something you're planning on doing, just because we don't want to have 20 people piling in here and only have seats for 8. But, that's a good problem to have. Anyway, wow, they're having dinner before. I just read the comments. Okay, so that's pretty much all we have for news from the shop. The other big news is next week will be the last week that we're doing this on a Wednesday. Starting August 19th, we're going to be doing this Thursdays at 6 instead of Wednesdays, you see, because we're so popular, we're moving closer to prime time.
Yeah.
Actually, it's for other reasons, but that's going to be, like I said, next Wednesday is the last Wednesday night, and then we'll be moving to Thursdays. That is, the other thing that I have on here is last week we talked about the new machines and stuff and said there was really good pricing available till the end of the week. Well, it turns out that pricing has been extended to the end of this week. So if you're interested in a new machine, let me know sooner than later. Let me know sooner than later because there are some pretty good deals going on, and if I get the order in by Friday, we can do really good on pricing. So that's all I have for shop news. Yay! Woo! Woo! Okay, so without Becky here, I feel kind of weird because it's just me. I don't have anybody to hand it off to cut the segments down, so it's back to me. Like I said, no quiz time this week because I don't pay enough attention to be able to put a quiz together about last week. Quilt of the week, I screwed that up too because, well, I didn't get a quilt of the week ready for Eddie. And then that leaves us Turbo Tip, which again isn't going to happen because there's no Becky. And the workbench is not happening either, so this is a big fail this week. But we are going to talk about some good stuff. I had talked about some of this previously, I think in previous episodes, but this might have been before Becky, before it became Shenanigans. So if you've been a longtime fan, like one of the OG fans, you might have heard some of this already. But if you haven't, this is just, I just wanted to cover some interesting stuff as it relates to fabric because, well, you all signed on to learn something, so hopefully I can kind of teach that or shed some knowledge, as it were. Okay, jumping right into it. What I wanted to get into today was fabric, and we're probably going to spend a little bit of time on digital versus screen printing. But one of the things when we talk about fabric, I'm talking like quilting fabric, and as I've got some fun stuff here, but we'll get into, is thread count. What's a good thread count? Is higher better?
200.
200 is a good thread count?
Sure.
Do we know what thread count means?
No. Actually, yes, sheets. My
Sheets?
sheets are like 850.
Okay, do you know what that means?
It's softer than 200.
That's what they
You know,
want you to.
Walmart brand.
Thread count is how many threads you have. I believe it's in an inch. So how many threads are going this way and how many threads going up and down. You do an inch and you count those threads, and that's your thread count. 150 is where they start. As you get higher, it's supposed to be better. And this is what the sheet companies would have you believe, and it might be true. I don't know. I'm not a sheet aficionado, and I hardly ever make the bed. If I didn't have a significant other, the sheets probably wouldn't get changed, and that's a confession I probably shouldn't make. But
Oh, we need that.
yeah, but that being said, so a lot of times you hear thread counts, that's usually related to bed sheets and cotton. Now you would think, oh well, quilting cotton, high quality, it's at a store, it's got to be high thread count. What do you think the thread count is for the for here in the store, Lynn?
What do I think the thread count
Yeah,
is?
if 150 is where it starts, what do you think the thread count for quality quilting fabric is?
Well, 500.
500? Anybody in the comments? Thread count of quilting fabric. Oh, come on, anybody? Anybody?
Well, there's a delay. Don't forget.
There's a delay. I guess it's going to be quiz time. Anyway, you would think, because we talk about these high thread counts and we're selling quality fabric here in the store, that, oh, that must be like 500 or 400, at least 200, No. Most quality quilting fabric is actually, by the thread count measurement, is 120.
Yeah.
It's a 60. It's what they call a 60 square. In a square inch of fabric, you've got 60 threads, warp and weft or whatever. Anyway, you've got a 60 threads going up and down and 60 threads going left to right, so for a total of 120.
This is what it says, 300.
Yes, 300. And Gene is actually closer to 100. It's 120 is your typical. They call it 60 square a lot of times for quilting cotton. Now, the reason that this idea of thread count is kind of a misnomer because thread count is just how dense the thread is in an area. There's another thing that a lot of people that you don't take into consideration with the thread count number is how thick are the threads. Because if you have thinner threads, you can get more of them in a fixed area. You have thicker threads, you get fewer of them. So that's why quilting cotton is usually 60 square or 120 because it's got a thicker thread than what you're going to get on your bed sheets. Next time you think about putting a bed sheet on the back of your quilt, because I know some of you all do it, because we do a lot of quilting and we see it happen. Compare the thickness and the heft of a sheet to a quality quilting fabric, and you're going to find that the quilting fabric is probably going to be a little bit thicker, and that's because not only is the thread count important, but the thread diameter. So that's why a quilting cotton is, like I said, if you actually do the thread count, it's about 120, but it's going to have a thicker thread than what you're normally going to get on like a high quality cotton sheet. And so thread count is kind of irrelevant when it comes to quilting cotton. Like I said, 60 square or 120 is kind of the standard on that. So, just throwing that out there, thread count. So the reason I kind of was going down this rabbit hole thread count, because I wanted to talk about digital versus screen printing. And one of the big differences that you're going to find is the base material that things are being printed on is probably more important, well, I'm not going to say more important, but as important as the method by which they're printing on it. Because you could have the most high-tech, best printing method in the world. If you're printing the garbage, it's just going to come out like garbage. So a good quality 60 square quilting fabric is where you want to start, regardless of if you're digitally printing or screen printing. So that's something to keep in mind, is when we talk about, and so when you see these discussions online and you fall down the rabbit holes in the different forums of all the digital prints versus screen prints, one of the things you have to keep in mind is a lot of the quality, the shops that were using quality fabric haven't really started printing with digital until very recently. So if you had a digital print from, say, 10 years ago, odds are it wasn't necessarily on quality fabric. So it's hard to make a comparison of the actual quality of the print if the underlying material isn't quality. And I feel like I'm talking to myself. But anyway, so that's why I just wanted to get into that for a minute. Is so a good quality quilting fabric is going to be 60 by 60. That's normal, but the heft of it's going to be a little bit different. It's a little bit thicker thread. So moving on. So you have a little note here, thread count. We covered that. I want to check it off my list. Yay! So there's that. And like I said, it's important when we get to talk about digital versus screen printing, it's very important, like I said, that what you're printing on is as important as the method of printing. The other thing that when I was doing my show prep, because believe it or not, I try to do some work before I come sit here and make a fool of myself, you run into pigments versus dyes. This was a weird thing I did. I guess I kind of knew this, but I didn't realize it until I was doing a show. I was like, oh, pigments versus dyes. Do you know the difference, Lynn? I see you looking. You don't know pigments versus, how about you, Danny? Pigments versus dyes. See, it's two different methods of putting color on fabric. A pigment is kind of like paint. So you ever see like a screen printed shirt that just has like caked on there and it's super bright with a rainbow, but instead of fading, it starts to like chip off. Yeah, that's a pigment. That's how pigment is better than dye when it comes to holding colors. That's why you see those ones that are just caked on but they chip off. The color is always fantastic. It's just flaking off. That's where pigments are superior to dyes in that they hold the color a lot better. The other thing too is dye, because dye is more like a paint, you can use it on different materials more easily because you're going to heat bond it on. So you can use pigments gets used on everything from polyesters to rayons to cotton. But most of your I'm going to say most, as far as I know, all of your quilting cottons are going to be screen dyed or dyed, not necessarily screen printed, but they're going to use dyes instead of pigments. A dye actually, basically, it's a dye. It soaks into the fibers. So the downside to a dye over pigment is color fastness, because anybody knows you wash something enough times that's dyed, it will eventually start to fade. So that's the but I mean, dye technology is actually getting really good, but that's one of the downsides to dyeing is the fact that it'll start to fade. The big upside, and the reason that you see it used in quilting fabric, is it's nice. It feels good. Dyed fabric feels like fabric. If you have a fabric that's been painted with pigment, it's stiff and icky. Again, I'll go back to old. You've seen those screen printed shirts with the pigments they're just stiff and so you don't see that on because the hand is a little bit different on it. So that's the difference, pigments and dyes. Now you can screen print or digitally print with either of those, pigments or dyes. But we're going to talk today about dyeing, because dyeing is the process that you're going to see on most of your quilting fabrics. If you're doing T-shirts, you can get into, or hats or whatever. Pigment is an option, but we're not going to get that deep into it. Thank you, Lynn.
Sorry.
Thank you. No, that's all right. I need somebody to break this up. Okay.
That's what she said.
because I don't know how many people I've lost already today. Yes, dye goes into the fabric. That is correct. See, I'm now looking here instead of my notes so I can see what people are saying. So we're going to talk about dyeing. Dyeing is more expensive than pigments too. That's why a lot of times, some screen print companies just have buckets of pigments. Years ago, I used to have a buddy out when I was living in Baltimore, and he did some screen printing. Most everything he did was with pigments, just painted it on. It's much easier, cheaper setup, and for T-shirts, it's fantastic. But it's not going to work for quilting fabric or fabric. Or the other downside to dyes too, while I'm on it, is you can do it. The technology's there now; it's a little bit better, but from a digital standpoint, but getting into different fibers like cotton dyes really well, but some of like your synthetics aren't going to hold dyes as well because of the fact is it's soaking in, and if you ever try and paint like a piece of PVC, you know that spray paint usually just chips right off eventually, and the same concept kind of holds at the fiber level for like a polyester or a synthetic dye, is if you're trying to soak something into it, it's not going to stick very well. But that's, again, irrelevant, or a sidebar. It's not irrelevant, it's interesting. I don't know how it's useful, but it's interesting. So anyway, now let's get into digital versus screen, because I wanted to get into this. I think I covered it once a few weeks ago, and I kind of did a deep dive on it because digital really is the future of fabric. And what led me down this road, the reason I actually am going this direction, is tonight I was actually going to talk about collections versus basics, which is very important in the shop side, marketing side of the fabric world, because what happens is there's some fabrics that I always have, like solids, or for example, the Northcott Toscana line, Benartex Wave Texture. All those lines are what they consider basics. So when I run out of blue wave texture, I can order another bolt of blue wave texture from Benartex and it'll be the same as that one. And I've been able to do that now for about 5 years. Fossil Fern, I think, has been out for 10 years. Every now and then they'll discontinue a color, but pretty generally speaking, on a basic like that, you can just reorder when you run out. Now, what they consider collections, a lot of times, they do this on purpose as kind of an exclusivity thing. That's why you can go on, for example, eBay and find like a tulip pink or a tulip pink that people are going to pay $100 a yard for, because they're never going to see it again, because it's not going to be made again, because it's a collection. A lot of times collections are 1 or 2 fabric runs, and they're not reproduced. So there's a very important distinction when you're shopping for fabric for a quilt. If it's a basic and you don't get to your quilt till the end of the year and you find out you're short, you could probably get more of it. If you bought, for example, the Curious and Curiouser from Tulip Pink that we have in the shop. Say you bought the Red Queen, but you don't get to making that quilt till next February. The odds of finding that Red Queen are going to be very hard, because if it's sold out, it's sold out. Nobody will be able to reorder it because it's a collection. It's not a basic. Whereas if the accompanying mineral from Tulip Pink is considered a basic, so you didn't have enough of the yellow, I don't remember what the color is, but say the amethyst mineral. You didn't have enough of that. Well, I can reorder that. I'm sure I'll be able to reorder that next June without a problem, because it is a basic, but I won't be able to get the prints in the collection. So the reason that was where I was originally going to go tonight, was to explain all that, but then I realized that was going to take me all of about 2 minutes, which I just did. So it's like I need more to talk about, because, that's the way it goes. But the reason that's important is when you're buying your fabric, you want to make sure, if it's a collection, you may want to overbuy, just to make sure that you have enough. Basics, like I said, we can always reorder them. But one of the things that is interesting is digital printing is kind of changing this equation, because digital printing is actually, you can do in much smaller runs. In regular screen printing of fabric, a manufacturer has to do at least around 1,000 yards at least minimum. And the turnaround time on that is, you're talking like usually 8 months. From the time that they have come up with the design to the time where it's printed, it's an 8-month window. And 1,000 yard minimum if you're going to screen print it. So there's a lot of times, if you see a Moda collection in a magazine that you just got to have, and Moda is really famous for this, and then you come in the shop and say, I just saw this great new fabric in this magazine. Can you get me some? If I didn't order it 6 months ago, I can't get it. Moda is famous for this. They've done a really good job of this. They're probably There's a couple other companies do it, but Moto is good for this. Is it shows up in Block Magazine, this great collection. Can I get that? No, because I didn't order it. If I didn't order it, the odds of me being able to get it are next to nothing if it's a collection from Moto. Moto usually, I believe the formula Moto uses is they take all the orders that they got for a line, because I see the stuff that I got in last week for fabric, I actually ordered probably last November or December. Just to kind of, I'll give you an idea, so when something comes in, you're like, why did he get that? Well, because I probably had a different mindset, 6 months ago when I ordered it. But keep that in mind. When I get a new collection, I probably ordered it, like I said, at least 6 months ago, probably closer to 8. And so when you see this Moto collection that you got to have in a magazine, you come in looking for it. If I didn't order it 6 months ago, I'm probably not going to get it, because like I said, like I started to say before I got sidetracked with, is that Moto usually takes their orders, and I believe it's a 20%. So they overproduce by 20% on top of what people have already ordered. So if I didn't order it, then there's only that small little extra that is going to be available for me to order. And if it's a popular collection, it's probably already sold out before I even found out about it. So that's the way collections work. Now, the reason that this digital printing affects this is digital printing doesn't have an 8-month window. Digital printing, I can take it off a computer. If I wanted to make myself a new line of fabric tomorrow and I had the file on the computer, if I can find a factory that's doing it, I can go have myself 10 yards made tomorrow and have it for sale next Tuesday. That's how quick. Digital turnaround is a much quicker process. So the window, that window of from when it's ordered to when it's delivered is probably going to start changing. That was fantastic.
Sorry.
So what I'm starting to see on the from the shop standpoint is I really expect to see some of these windows of collections to shrink a little bit, because of digital printing really expedites that. I forgot to grab it. I have a sample from Quilting Treasures, has actually gone completely 100% digital. It might be down on the floor next to my computer. There's like a piece of fabric with a bunch of stuff printed on it. I meant to grab it. But Quilting Treasures has gone 100% digital printing. So any of their collections have all been digitized. What's cool about it is when the fabric rec comes around now, he actually can show me a print of the fabric, because instead of having it on paper, perfect. So thank you. So in the past, and this is just a sample I got from Quilting Treasures, you'll notice this right here represents an entire line of fabric. Now in the past, when I was buying fabric from a rep, each one of you would get this on paper, and then I'd have to hope that it looks as good on fabric. With digital printing, all they did is they said, rather than print it on paper, let's just print it out on the fabric. So now I can see exactly, what it's going to look like on fabric. And they've even got a couple different, if you really look at this, you've got one fabric up here, and you've got some other stuff down here. But this is the beauty of digital printing. In the past, you couldn't do that. Because of the turnaround time from when it designs to when it ships, they only had paper samples because they didn't have the actual goods printed yet. So digital printing is making it really easy for me to see stuff ahead of time. Now I'm trying to find downsides to digital printing, and really I don't know that there is from a wear and tear standpoint. Because, I've been trying to fight it because I'm like, digital printing, newfangled stuff, who needs that stuff? Well, it's the future. And I really think where we're going to see a change is the availability of things. Because where they can print on demand now, where Moda has to make a business decision, we'll use Moda again as an example, that they get all these orders and take those orders plus 20% is how much they're going to make. Then they can say, well, we only got orders for 2,000 yards of this, so we're going to make 2,000 yards, and that's it, because they don't have to do these huge numbers. If they only got an order for 500, they can make 50 yards of a fabric, and that would be it. So I think what we're going to start seeing with digital prints is you're going to see a lot more exclusive lines coming out because it's easier to do. Now, one of the things that's interesting as we talk about this collections versus basics, there's a few companies that reprint all the time. And one of them was Blank. I think Blank may have changed it because Blank actually got picked up by Jaftex. But Blank Quilting never, if they had a collection that was successful, they would reprint that collection until it wasn't successful anymore. So there was no exclusivity to their collections, which was very interesting. So they had these huge catalogs of fabric that you could always order, and they were always adding new fabric. But if it was a popular line, they would keep reprinting and reprinting. Now, that strategy seems like it would be a good one. Give the people what they want. Well, understand that blank quilting almost went out of business if Jaftex hadn't scooped them up. Because what happens is, think about yourself. If you know that you can always get it, what's gonna give you the urgency to buy it today? I'll just come in next week when I'm ready for it. See, that's the psychology behind it. And so what you're going to start seeing with digital printing is there's going to be much more exclusivity of the collections coming out because they don't need to do these huge runs anymore. So I think what you may find in your shops is you're going to find very interesting localized, and this probably is going to be for another 5, maybe 10 years, but shops are going to have a really interesting localized flavor because of just the sheer availability of different prints because we don't have to do huge runs. But if you see it, you better buy it because who knows if you're ever going to see it again. Because most of the shops have caught on to this idea that they're not going to reproduce something. For example, Tula Pink is super famous, one of those popular designers. She's getting, or people are getting 50. I saw one on eBay going for, I think, $100 for a yard. And that's because it's never going to be printed again. Free Spirit's not going to reprint it. Now, my suspicion is that design might get reprinted in a different color in about 5 years. I've seen that happen. If you sell fabric long enough, you start to see designers recycle some of their patterns, but they don't recycle the colors often. They'll take a very similar pattern, tweak it a little bit, and then add the color to it. Yes?
How does the color fade?
Versus digital versus.
For everything I've seen is what you're going to see on color fade is I don't think that we're going to see a real difference in it. The technology now for digital printing with sublimation is on par with screen printing because they are dyeing the fabric. I don't think one of my concerns was always is it going to be on par. I really think you got to keep in mind. I want to say Spoonflower is probably the original digital printer. They've been doing it since 2008. The fact that, like I said, Quilting Treasures has gone 100% digital. I think Kaufman may be going, or Hoffman might be going, is if it's not, they're pretty heavy into digital at this point. So I don't think the color fade is going to be an issue. But, yes, has anyone bought an entire bolt at Four Pines because they really like a collection of fabric? Yes.
I figured you'd know the answer.
Yes. In fact, there was a really cool backing that went to the Curious Earring. The backing, it wasn't even like a 45, it was like the expensive wide. That's why I don't have any Tula Pink backing. Because the backing that came in with the Alice in Wonderland stuff, somebody came in, they saw it, and I got to have it, and they bought the whole thing. So it happens. A lot of times it'll happen, large prints tend to do it more than small prints because large prints have more use in large quantities. But yeah, I've had more than one person just buy an entire bolt because they loved it. And they didn't know if they're going to see it again. And yeah, that happens. So, so now we're going to get into the difference between digital and screen. And we're going to use some of my favorite fabrics. This is one of my all-time favorites. This is one of my favorite fabrics.
Exactly.
It is awesome. It's got some nice vibrant colors. And it is a screen print. The quick check to see if it's a screen print is look down here on the bottom. These numbers on the bottom on the salvage are your screens. So the more of these there are, the more screens it took to make this. That's the other problem with screen printing, is each color needs a screen. So it takes a lot more work to get more colors. The other thing is screens are usually limited to 24 inches, which is why most repeats are 24 inches long, which is 2/3 of a yard. So this is screen printed, and I'll see if I can find a full, there you go. So this is your full, yeah, go to the overhead one. Let's see if that'll probably work better. Yeah, you can kind of, yeah, that shows me what I want to see. So each one of these stars represents a different screen that was used for this fabric, and you can see there's a ton of them. And so the reason I chose this fabric, if you look here, you see there's a very slight gradation from that yellow up to that red, but you're seeing that here in the cats. That's why they had that, so you can get this interesting gradation in the cats. But if you look closely at this fabric, you're going to see it only has that many colors in it. that where it looks like it fades from the yellow up to the red, that's kind of an optical illusion because there's only 2 or 3 colors in that area there. It's not an actual fade. You see this a lot on ombre prints as well, where it looks like there's a bunch. It's just because they put their screens close together. So this is a screen print. Now, the reason, now I'm going to pull another one up, and this one originally, we're going to go back to the other camera here in just a second, but you'll notice on this here, there is no, on the salvage, I've got no screens on this because this was digitally printed. Okay, go over here and see if this will show up on this one. Now, when I pulled this off the shelf, I was looking for digital versus screen. I was like, I thought this was a screen print. Because in the past, this would not be hard to do with a screen because you've got, what, 2 colors in there, green and black, right? So you would think, well, that's fairly easy to do. But the reason where it's digital is look at how you've got that fading on there from the nose to the head. It's a nice gradual change right up to the top. You could do that with screens and gradiate it and all that, but that's the beauty of digital is you've got that range of green from, and it just gradiates nicely. Where you could do, like I said, you probably could have done this with screens, but it's digital. And you would, I don't know how many screens you would have needed to fade that, to get that shading that you have here. You get a lot more, and you can see it even more on this one. This is a really good example of digital printing because you've got a lot going on in this. You've got just that sunburst, the way that it comes out from there, you can just see all the different colors in there. It's not like there's just 3 colors or 4 colors. That's the entire spectrum for yellow they've used there. So that's what makes digital printing so dang cool, is the fact that you can get all of these colors now. And if for any of you old-timer computer people that used to play with like MS Paint, I don't know if you remember like the old 8-bit one where you had 8 colors, and then at one point it got up to like 56 colors and then 252 colors, or the 864 anyway. That's kind of what screen printing, digital printing is. You no longer are limited to how many colors you have. You can use whatever's out there. Now the problem with that, and this is and this probably goes hand in hand with Bonnie's class that she was teaching about color theory. One of the problems you have with that is you now have an infinite number of colors you're matching to. Where before you could take one of those screens because, for example, Toscana, Northcott. Northcott probably had, who knows, in their thing, they probably had 100 different blues. Whenever they printed, they used one of 100 different blues to print stuff. So that's 1 in 100 to match up. And so you could go to the Toscana wall and find a blue that was printed with the same blue that was in your collection fabric. And it was probably the same dye, they just used it in different screens. Because they have a finite number of colors, so they often have a finite number of dyes. So it was very easy to match colors. No, Gene, they do not have the color reference dots because the color reference dots are actually the screen reference. It's a reference to the screen they use. So because they're not using screens, they don't have the dots. And there's no colors to reference. It's like I said, it's an infinite number. It's whatever's on the screen because it's not limited to the screens that they're using. Limited on the screen, the computer screen, not the printing screen. And so that's what makes matching up digital prints very hard is you've got infinite numbers. I've got a really good example. I probably should have grabbed it, but I'm not going to. We had a collection come in from Northcott where the panel is digitally printed, and then the coordinate is not. The coordinate is screen printed. And the red coordinate is supposed to go with the panel red coordinate, but they're off a hair. And that's because, I really think it has to do with the fact that the red that was in the original artwork was probably off slightly from the dye, from their red dye. So when they printed it up, it's slightly off. Whereas if they had printed the red coordinate with digitally, it would have matched the panel a lot better because they would have been using the same electronic color reference. Anyway, so that was kind of all I was really going to get into tonight, was just the difference between digital and screen, because like I said, digital is the future, and what that's going to mean for us going forward as quilters is you're going to see a lot more exclusivity in fabric. You're not going to see as big production runs. well, you might still see big production runs. You see on-demand printing. I also am not sure if they're going to do like limited runs. Like instead of doing an actual quantity, it's a limited time. It wouldn't surprise me if they started kind of going that route, because they do want to maintain a certain scarcity. One of the things is they're trying to maintain a certain scarcity of new collections to entice you to buy the new collections. So digital is going to make more for more collections, but they're going to have. But I think it's also going to make some scarcity in some of the really cool stuff, because they're going to try and protect that asset. But I don't know. It's going to be interesting going forward. But it does change the back end of fabric a lot, and I really think it's going to change what, as a consumer, you're going to start seeing, as far as we might start seeing a lot more interesting stuff. We just won't see as big a collection. So I think you're going to see stores get a lot more niche. Like I'm going to have a lot more Bigfoot, aliens, and catacorns, because you're going to start seeing a lot of more. You're going to see a lot more of that kind of stuff designed too, because you no longer have to. Designers aren't going to be limited to like how many people are going to. They don't have to try to appeal to everybody, so that they can justify printing 1,000 yards of fabric. They've only got to appeal to like 3 of me, and that's what 4 bolts. 4 bolts is 100 yards of fabric. And if you can design a collection for 100 yards of fabric that somebody's going to buy, you're going to start seeing a lot more diversity. I think it's going to be really interesting. I can't wait to see it. It's going to be a pain in the butt, though, for buying, because when the sales reps come, they're going to just have buckets and buckets. Or they're going to be like Quilting Treasures and just like, here, this is everything we got. Which one you want? But anyway, I think it's interesting. There's a lot of stuff out there about it. It's here to stay for sure. I wouldn't worry. Like I said, the quality. I know there's been a question of quality, and that's one thing I had. But my research is the how's it going to hold up over time versus screen printing. I really think the technology is almost the same. You may color fastness. I can see some screen prints don't print as vivid as some digitals don't seem to print as vivid as some screen prints, and I'm not sure if that has more to do with the translation of the digital image to the fabric, that some of that information gets lost. I really think that is going to get better as we go along. But I mean, you can kind of see it if you want to go to the overhead here, Eddie. You can just kind of see it along these 3 fabrics. That camera doesn't really do it justice. But the brightness and vividness of this, the screen printed, is much brighter and more vivid than these digital prints. And I don't know if that's an artifact of the printing process, or more an artifact of the processing of the image to put it on the fabric. But I could be wrong. I have not laughed at all tonight. I'm sorry, John.
Oh, we need Becky.
Yeah, I know.
She's always making fun of you.
It's not like I'm a hard target. I mean, you guys have really been slacking. Anyway.
Listening. Learning.
Anyway.
Sorry, John.
Anyway, so yeah, this was long and boring. I do apologize, John. I mean, we got to take care of John. He's like.
He's a dude.
Yeah, he's like a rare. He's like a rarity among
A unicorn.
I don't know. I don't.
Dude, he's a unicorn.
Well, wait. How does that work out? So girls like to call it unicorn, right? Is a guy like a rhinoceros because it's a one-horned beast?
Oh, that's a good question. We'll have to come up with something.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I bet Becky would have an answer for that.
Yeah,
Yes, true.
she'd say, yeah, move along.
Move along, yes. Anyway, so that's all I really had tonight. I just wanted to, like I said, I didn't have a whole lot. I probably should have put something better together, but Becky's the creative one that comes up with the cool stuff. If you want me to make cool stuff,
She gets
anybody
your-
that's been following me on Facebook knows that my last week's project was a scooter-mounted water cannon. That is freaking awesome.
Whoop, whoop.
But I'm thinking my target demographic here has no desire to see a high-pressure water system on a scooter.
John's wife says he never laughs.
We have
Anyway.
stories.
I thank you all for joining us. Becky will be back next week to entertain and make us all realize why we miss her. So remember, sew on and be